Hello again, I'm Kyra Lehtinen, the Makerspace Educator with Discovery Children's Museum in Las Vegas, Nevada. And for today's at-home discovery, I'm doing a second part to our TinkerCAD tutorial. Now, if you haven't seen the other one yet, I introduced a couple of the basic controls for TinkerCAD, so if you've never tried it before, I recommend watching that video first. For today's project, we are going to do a bit more of an advanced project. I'm going to go over some new controls, like how to stack objects. And today I wanted to teach you guys how to make a little robot keychain. Now, I always recommend before you get started designing something original on TinkerCAD, you want to do a rough sketch first. So engineers and designers always do a rough sketch before they get started on their big project to give them an idea of what they're trying to do. So I did a little rough sketch for my robot keychain, and this is what it looks like. Now, if you notice, it's not very pretty. It is rough. That's why we call it a rough sketch. So this will give me an idea of what it is I want to build and what shapes I'm going to need, since TinkerCAD is a shape-based CAD software. So you are also welcome to build your own project at this time. This is just a good way to practice some of the controls. But anyways, draw yourself a rough sketch of what you'd like to do, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
So I've already logged into my TinkerCAD account and opened up a new design. Again, here's that randomly generated name. So I'm going to change that to what it is we're building today, which is Robot Keychain. So I'm taking a look at my sketch here, and a lot of the shapes that I used for my robot are going to be box type shapes. So we're going to get really friendly with the box button today. So first thing I'd like to do, you know what, I think I'm going to try starting with the legs. I'll work from the bottom to the top. So I've got one leg. Let's see, for the front of my foot, all I did was draw a simple box. But taking a look at this, a box could give me some really long feet. So I think I'm going to do a triangle instead of a box. Now I want the triangle, I could do the roof one, but I want the one that's kind of got a right angle on it, so I'm going to do a wedge. Now right away we can see this wedge is just a little too big. So I'm going to rotate this around. All the way to 180 degrees, which is around, all the way around, so it's facing the opposite direction. So I'm going to hold down the shift key on my keyboard and click and drag the height button so it's a little bit smaller. And let's see how this looks up against my robot leg. All right, so it's pretty good. I could make it a little bit wider though so it fits the leg. So I'm going to stretch it to the side. And that's looking pretty good. Maybe my robot leg doesn't need to be that wide, so I'm going to shorten it up. I want to make sure my leg and foot are perfectly aligned. So I'm going to come up here and click this align tool, and it's going to open up all these different controls I can do. I can see that they're already all grayed out though. I wanted it perfectly aligned in the middle this way, which is good. If I clicked on this one over here, they would align them in the middle that way, and you know, as you can see, it disappears into it. That's not exactly what I want. So I'll press the undo button, put that leg out there, and this is exactly what I want. So I'm going to start by grouping this together. I've clicked and selected both of them by dragging a red rectangle over it. I'm going to press this button right here, group. And now I've got one foot-shaped leg. Now, robot's got to have two legs, so I'm going to duplicate this. You can either press this button up here, which says duplicate, or I am going to hold down Command D for my keyboard shortcut and use my arrow on the keyboard to move it out to the side, and now I've got two legs. Just so they don't end up moving around on me, and because I know that they're perfectly aligned right now, I'm going to group them together. So now if I try moving this around, they move together as one. All right, so we're done with the legs. I'm going to move on up to the body of my robot now. So this is where stacking comes in. Let me find my box again. There we go. All right, now there are two ways you can stack things. So what we're working with here, because we're working in three-dimensional space, we have a blue coordinate plane. If you've ever studied geometry, that's the XY axis that we use all the time for graphing stuff or drawing shapes or lines. Don't worry about that stuff today. However, There is also something called the z-axis. So while the y-axis is over here and the x-axis goes across this way on our flat piece of blue paper, the z-axis is the invisible axis that moves things up and down in space. So as you can see, I'm able to drag this guy up and down, and if at any point I'm like, oops, I want to drop it back down onto my blue work plane, I'm going to press just the letter D on my keyboard. I like to say D for drop. Even if my guy is underneath my work plane, I press D again, and it drops back up. All right, so I could either use that Z control with this little black cone here to drag it up and move that on top of my legs, like this. However, one of my favorite shortcuts on here is something called the Workplane Tool. So because we're dealing with different planes, this is a way so you can select something easily. So I'm going to click the Workplane Tool, and if you see me move my mouse around, I now have this little square that follows me wherever I go. If I put it up on the side of something, it'll actually follow it. So now I could actually choose a vertical plane. What I want is for my box to go right on top of the leg. So see how it kind of bent over, now it's in the top of my leg? I can now click that and I have a new work plane. So now when I press the D for drop button, it's going to drop right down to the top of that work plane right where I want it. To put the work plane tool away and to select the other tool, the other work plane again, you're just going to click it and we're back to normal. So there's my box resting on top of my legs. Now I want this bigger, and I think I'm gonna nudge it forward a little bit with the arrows on my keyboard. And that looks more like the robot body I want. I'm gonna make this guy a little taller too. I think his body's a little bit more of a square in my design. So now I'd like to I'm gonna start by putting the head on top. We'll come back to the arms later. So what should I do to put the head on top? Let's do that work plane tool again. Scooch it around, find the top of the box I want to put it on right there. Now because I didn't have a shape made already, I don't have to press D for drop. Any new shape I bring in is now going to be on that new work plane, just like this. So I'm going to put my work plane tool away, and I can see my robot guy is kind of coming together. His head's a little far forward. So I'm going to select all my shapes so far. Since I already grouped my feet, they shouldn't move. And I'm going to try and align everything perfectly in the center. There we go. Now I can also align it perfectly in the center here. And now I can see he's got this big belly sticking over his feet and up like that. I think I'm going to nudge his feet forward a bit. So using the arrows on my keyboard, I'm going to scooch it to the front a little bit. There we go. I think that's more where I want him to be. Now, right now, his head is just as wide as his body, so he's just going to be this pretty flat plane. Now, our heads are a little smaller than our bodies are wide, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key and grab one of these white squares to resize his head proportionally. And if you like his head bigger, you can totally do that too. This is just what I'm working on right here. I see he's got this little dome that I've put on the top of his head that the keychain's going to be attached to. So this round roof looks like the right shape for the top of his head. I'm going to shrink that because that looks a little big for him. And let's go ahead and work plane, drop it up with the letter D, put the work plane away, and now I'm going to drag this to be on top of his head, hopefully. I'm actually just going to align his head and his little dome perfectly centered. 1, 2. Ta-da! That looks good. And I'm going to group that together too. Group. All right, so how do you think this looks? So I've done the main skeleton of his body. Now we just need to figure out some more embellishments to put on him. Though, you know what, before we do that, I'm thinking his legs and body are huge compared to his head. So I'm not grouping them, but I've selected both of them. So now if I hold the Shift key and drag down, his body is now sizing proportionally. And if I grab this, click the work plane, put the work plane on top, D, I drop his head down where I think it should go. So I'm going to start first by making one of his arms. Now this is where we can use the Workplane to do vertical planes as well. So see how it's falling up the side of his body? So instead of it being on top of the robot, it's now going to be connected to his shoulder. Now looking at my drawing here, I have a rectangle shape for his shoulder. So I'm going to put a shape here. Now, obviously, that is massive, right? So I'm going to now start resizing it. Now, if you notice, the controls are kind of in reverse because right now we are on the plane, which is vertical. So it's kind of wonky looking. If I put this away, though, it's still aligned with my body. So let's nudge this guy where it looks a little better. So now we've got his shoulder. So that's looking pretty good. Now for the next part of his arm, I drew a rectangle for his arm with a little bit of like a ring shape at the end for his hand. So let's see. Since we're going with mostly squares, actually let's spice it up a little and do a cylinder instead. So I'm going to make the cylinder tall by dragging on this, and then we're going to shrink it all together holding the shift key and drag it down. So now if I move this over here, I can now use that Z arrow to move it up. And as you can see, it's still way out to the side. You always want to adjust to make sure things are lining up properly while you're building. And maybe I could drop it down a little further. Ta-da! Now we have a robot arm. Not a perfectly centered robot arm. I'm gonna use that alignment tool. I selected both of them by holding shift down and clicking each one at a time. And there is my alignment button. I've now lined them both up in the middle from each other. All right, so now we come down here. Ooh, this tube shape is perfect for his hand. Now, as you can see, it's huge. I'd also like his hand to be a little thicker. There's actually a couple of different controls for this type of shape. Not all of the shapes have all these available controls, but as you can see, there's something that says radius. That's how wide it is. There's the wall thickness, which is what I want to use right now. You can also choose to make it more polygonal, or if you want to make it more of like a perfect ring by giving it loads and loads of sides. Somewhere in between is probably good. You could also bevel it, which is rounding the corners a bit until you get like that kind of shape. I'm going to keep it mostly cylindrical since he's a robot and robots have a lot of sharp edges. Now this is huge. First thing I would like to do is flip this around so it's oriented the way I want. And I think I'm going to need this ring right here. So if I click and drag that, if I keep my arrow inside this circle, it'll jump to the largest degrees. If I'm on the outside, you can see it's much more gradual. Since I want it at perfectly 90 degrees, I'm going to take it there and boom, that's all I want. So this is currently huge, right? First I'm going to drop it up to the work plane so that way I don't lose it underneath the work plane. And now I'm going to hold that shift key down, click and drag. Now we're getting a smaller shape that I think might be more of a hand for my robot. So let's take this over here and use that Z control to bring it up and check it out from the side. Ooh, let's see. I can nudge it over a little bit, but I think it's too skinny for his arm. So I'm going to scooch it over, make it a little wider. Let's see how that looks. There we go. That kind of looks like a hand, right? Not too bad, not too bad at all. So this arm is almost complete. I'm going to bump out this shoulder a little bit just to match my drawing a bit. Ugh, there we go. Just a tiny bit. And there we have a robot arm. So now I'm going to group these three together so they're all one shape. I'm going to hold down the shift key on my keyboard and click one, then click the other, and then click that one. When they're all highlighted in blue, that means they've been selected, and then I'm going to come up here and press the group button. Okie doke. So now I've got this arm on one side of the body. So if you guys remember, I'm going to use that duplicate key, or you can press Command D on your keyboard, and now there is a duplicate that is lined up with this one. So without clicking anything else, I can now press hold down one of my keys over here and line it up on the side. So if I don't know if this is lined up enough, I can also group these guys together. Hold down Shift, click this guy, group them together, and now I'm going to try that alignment key by selecting everything all over again. Let's get them all perfectly aligned. There we go. Now we have a very symmetrical looking robot so far. All right. So now to work on his details like his face. Let's do his face next. So I'm gonna need 2 eye shapes. And you know what? I really liked this tube shape we worked with before. I'm gonna keep that as his eye shape. I'm gonna increase that wall thickness a bit because, yeah, I like how that looks. Now, I find it easiest. Some people like to assemble things right on the face all in one go, but I like to start big. It's a lot easier to work with things when they're big. So I'm going to build my face over on the side over here. So I've got one eye. I'm going to duplicate that eye, scooch it over. Now I have the start of a robot face. So looking at my drawing I have a couple rectangles for his robot mouth. Maybe something like that. All right, I'm going to use that duplicate key, but this is going to be something where I'm going to duplicate a series in order to make a pattern. So I'm going to press the duplicate key or hold down Command D, Control D will also work if you have a regular PC. And now I'm going to nudge it over and I have my second, quote, robot tooth. So without clicking on anything and keeping it as is, I am now going to press the duplicate key a couple more times. So I'm going to do Control D, Control D, Control D. And that is how I made a repeating pattern for his robot face. And to keep all those teeth together, I can group them. And now I can group these guys. And let's line them perfectly together. Line to the middle. And maybe I'll move this up a little closer to his face. There we go. And now if I group all these guys together, I now have a huge face that I can move around. So just like I did before with turning the hand upright, I'm going to turn this guy upright to 90 degrees, drop it up. Now clearly it's too huge. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and resize everything together. And now I'm going to use the Z plane control. And let's see if I can get this to embed into his face by nudging it with my arrow keys. Not too bad. His eyes are a little tall, so I'm going to drop it down a little. And select everything, perfectly align. And there is my robot face. Looking good, looking good. All right. Oh, and I totally forgot. He needs a little keychain loop at the top of his head. So let's go find that tube shape again. I'm going to make the walls thicker so that way the keychain doesn't break. Rotate that 90 degrees. And let's see, drop it up, shrink it down. Now, if you notice, I don't really use the Workplane tool for rounded surfaces like this, and I'm going to show you why. So flat surfaces like squares are absolutely perfect for the Workplane tool, but look what happens when I get up here. All of those little parts of the curve are actually planes. So it actually takes several flat planes in order to make a curve, and it's very difficult to find the right one which is right on top. You can either try to use that to line it up just right, or in my case, I prefer to not even bother. I'm just going to use my Z plane to move this guy up, click and drag, and try to see if I can get it where I want it. And that may be a big for it. Let's see, scooch that down. Let's increase the radius. And let's try lining that up perfectly in the middle again. Now I've got my robot's keychain head. Though it's floating a little closer to the back, I'm going to nudge that forward just a tad. And there I have my keychain support. Oh, Artistically speaking, I think his head dome's a little big, so I'm going to ungroup this. That's something you can do if you're like, oops, this was a little taller than I wanted to be. I'm going to now nudge this guy shorter. Maybe about there. Yeah. And I'm going to nudge my keychain into it a little further, just to make sure it's nice and strong and reinforced. And of course you can adjust this any way you want to. You can say, oh, that dome's too short for me. I want it to be a high dome or something. But I think that'll work. I'm going to group his whole head together now. Boom. All right, so the last things I'm going to need are some bling on the front of his chest here, or some robot buttons, because if you've got a robot, you gotta be able to input the settings and code so he knows what he's doing. So I just use some rectangles and circles to look like a TV screen and some buttons. And there I have some controls. And I would say this guy looks pretty good for a robot. So I could give this a try, printing it, and see how it turns out. I'm used to using my TinkerCAD models for 3D printing. However, I know most of you guys don't have 3D printers at home. So I'm going to show you a couple of other ways that you can use your model. Now, because I was planning to 3D print this, I don't need this keychain loop for not 3D printing, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. You could also change some of the colors on your guy here. So if I wanted to make him I'm going to just make all of him a gray robot, because that's usually the color of robots. And maybe I'll give him some different colored buttons by pressing on these keys here. Let's see, that'll be yellow. And maybe a white TV screen. And maybe these guys will be some different colors as well. I'm shift selecting those. And, ooh, blue. Blue seems like a good one. And then maybe I'll give him some yellow eyes. And yellow teeth, that works. So I could give him some different colors if I wanted to. Usually grouped items will all color together, so you can always ungroup them in order to change their colors. But I'm going to show you how to play with your model if you don't happen to have 3D printing. So if you take a look up here, I've got two other buttons. Right now we're in build mode, which is this box with 9 boxes inside of it. However, I can also use this for Minecraft. So this is Minecraft export mode. This will give you a preview of if you import the STL into Minecraft, what it will look like. Now, this is me on as high a quality as it gets. And as you can see, I could probably make this guy bigger so I could get him even more high quality. So I'm going to group the whole guy together. Or I'm not going to group him together. I'm going to click and drag and make him huge. And now if we go to Minecraft mode and do high quality block, now I've got a huge robot. So if I export an STL file, I can import that or download it into Minecraft, and then I could have this giant robot that I could climb up and play with. You can also see that over here we've got all these different materials that'll show what it's made out of. So I've got his little TV looks like it's made of snow, his eyes and mouth are made of sponge, his blue buttons are made of ice, but I could even like click on one of these and say I'd rather have it be made of lapis lazuli, and maybe instead of a white TV screen, maybe I'll have that made of quartz. And that way you can play with it inside of Minecraft. Now, if you're not a huge Minecraft fan, there's also Lego planning mode. So if you click on this button that looks like a Lego, it'll show you how you can try to build these guys from the bottom up with Legos. Now, this doesn't allow for exporting, but what this does let you do is plan any Lego projects you might have. You can actually look at it layer one step at a time in order to figure out how you would build a giant robot out of Legos. And I'll show you how you can do that. Just like the Minecraft mode, there's low resolution, which is just a couple blocks, and there's high resolution, which is a lot of blocks. So this is great for if you're trying to figure out how to build something really big out of Legos. So I hope that helps you out, and I hope that gives you some fun ways that you can use your TinkerCAD account to play with some projects. Of course, you can always just keep it inside TinkerCAD and play with it in here. And of course, please share this with people. You can send them pictures by exporting and either sending the three-dimensional model or by sharing pictures of it with other people. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you learned a little more about TinkerCAD and you can use this to further your own designs and experiments. So signing off from my at-home makerspace, this is Kyra Lehtinen with Discovery Children's Museum. Have a good day.